Okay. So again, I'm Tanya Mitchell, Vice President of Research and Development. I'll just keep the webinar going from where we left off. So from what I hear or not hear, we would all agree that straight A's does not necessarily equal smart. And we came across this, several times at the beginning of this type of training. We had a student come to us that had actually had a GPA of 4.0, which is not necessarily a normal student we work with. But what happened is she had this 4.0, but when she took her ACT, she scored at the 53rd percentile, which makes her just above average. So, and because of that score, she was denied entrance into the college she wanted to go to. And we'll bring her up later, but her problem wasn't knowledge. It wasn't knowledge-based because she worked very, very hard. And hopefully all of us have kids that work really hard, that love to learn. And she was one of those kids. It's just that it took her maybe 3 or 4 times more than maybe someone with high cognitive skills. And she was a success story at the end, so we'll talk about her a little bit later. So when we get into brain training, we have this word brain. So what do you feel is required from the brain for success? Is it how much you know or how intelligent you are? Anyone who thinks it's how intelligent you are, raise your hand. Do you see the little hand raiser? Trying to get you involved in the webinar today. So you can raise your hand if you think it's how intelligent you are. Or you can chat and send a chat to us that says you think it's knowledge or intelligence. Well, let me debunk that for you, because we would say that for real success, there's actually 2 parts to learning. So you need the knowledge, which we would consider data storage, which hopefully that's what a lot of our kids or people we know are doing right now. So all 3 of my oldest kids are in school right now. Hopefully they're just absorbing all that knowledge I want them to absorb. But there's a whole other part to learning, which is intelligence, or someone's ability to process information. And depending on if my child has a hard time focusing, if they have a hard time maybe visualizing a concept the teacher is trying to explain to them, if they have a hard time remembering what they learned today, where it's maybe one of those subjects that builds onto it, it's going to affect the outcome of not only their knowledge, but how successful they'll be. So if we looked at this a different way, knowledge would be your accumulated facts, sort of the database by what a student or a person has to go by. And if we're talking about school-age kids, it's largely measured by achievement tests and grades. And I know that my kids just took a lot of those state tests in the last 2 weeks. Intelligence, however, is how well we input or how well we process that information once it's inputted. So, what do we do with what we see? What do we do with what we hear? It's our higher thinking skills. Excuse me, I'm getting over something here. Just a moment. It's even better that we're doing a webinar today, so I can't share with you what I have today. Intelligence is largely measured by IQ tests, and some of the top tests would be something like the WISC, or you might have heard the name Wechsler, as well as the Woodcock-Johnson, and then a lot of times SAT, ACT, or college entrance tests are really IQ tests by nature, sort of what they're covering. So as I talk to you, I've been in this field for a long time. If I say cognitive skills, processing skills, learning tools, mental skills or abilities, it's really all within that intelligence area. So here's another question for you. And any of you that have multiple kids probably have a good idea of what this is. And that is, if you give, a group of kids a task, why is it that after 15 minutes, one of those kids always seems to be done? Yet another kid is still struggling after an hour. Why is it? It's because they come with different tools. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. The problem is that some of those, if someone has certain weaknesses, it plays more into their academics, which then also will play into how successful they can be later on, and it can affect their whole outcome. So let's look at these different tools. And today, one of the things we want to do is cover some of these different skills, also give you an idea of how you would train that skill. Excuse me. And give you an idea of some of the things that we actually do in our one-on-one coaching. So if I were going to measure your IQ or measure IQ skills, I would actually test all these different areas. So we would look at attention, we'd look at working memory or long-term memory and short-term memory, processing speed, logic and reasoning. We do an executive processing speed test. Here's auditory processing, visual processing, and then probably about 2 more tests, and I could generate a very robust IQ score. In other words, it wouldn't be made up of, sometimes when people do an IQ test, it's really just a logic and reasoning test. It's not looking at this whole area. But when we're, when you go to a psychologist or something to get a diagnosis, or to look at an actual IQ score, they're going to measure all these areas, and then they're going to come up with a quotient, which would be an average of all those skills together. The problem with IQ or an IQ score is it gives very little understanding of why someone is struggling. So, why is it that 120 IQ, why is it that someone that has an IQ can't read? Why is that? And so hopefully today I'll be able to answer that question for you as well. So let's look at one of these skills, attention. Now this obviously, we focus on quite a bit. Attention is a trained skill and it can be improved. And so we're going to look at all these skills today. If someone wants to volunteer as a student for me, you can raise your hand and text us your phone number. Otherwise, I have 2 people in the room with me, and I can have them be my volunteer. But it's up to you. Anyone want to volunteer? You can just raise your hand. Maybe I'll show you the task. Now, anyone want to volunteer? Okay, so I'm going to put on my assistant today, Brittany. Did you unmute yourself? Let me unmute you here.
Well, there I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, so we'll use Brittany and then everyone can just sit back and watch. So attention is a skill that can not only be strengthened, but there's several skills of attention that maybe we don't think about as much. So normally when we think about attention, we think about staying focused for a long period of time. And if I were going to strengthen that skill, one thing that we would do in training is we have all these intense activities. It's almost like if you go to a gym and you do circuit training, and let's say you had a personal trainer with you, and as soon as you want to quit, they say, no, you got to do 10 more reps or something like that. That's a lot like our training. We have a personal trainer that sits with a student and just gets them to a point where they can barely handle something, and that's when you're going to see improvement. And a lot of times what happens is it doesn't matter what procedure we're working on, but that student will actually drop off the task or each task at about the same time. And we would consider that probably being their attention span. And so we can start working at building that skill. And one of my first students, Spencer, he came in and he was so off the walls, just, full of energy that he could focus for about 6 seconds or 12 seconds when he came in. And I know that because every 12 seconds he would do something and I would time it. By the end of 3 months of training, he could focus for 20 minutes. And that was a life-changing piece just by itself. And this is a hard skill to measure. So actually what I'm saying to you is probably one of the best measurements that we have because a lot of the tests out there aren't really giving you a good background, and that's why when someone has attention issues, they will not just give a test to diagnose an attention issue, but they'll do this whole questionnaire, and it's like a culmination of several things. And we don't diagnose anything. We just develop the skill. So if I were going to maybe train attention, one of the things I would do is just have someone do an activity for a long period of time, and we use a metronome in our training. Brittany, I'm going to have you read these words as quickly as you can. Are you ready?
Read the words or the color?
Read the words.
Read the words.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Get set, go.
Black, red, green, yellow, blue, blue, green, yellow, black, black, red, black, green, yellow, blue, black, black.
Good. Are you getting an echo?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. So, and we'll put them on metronome, and what the metronome does is every second they have to do something, and so they can't take a mental break. And we can work with that. And again, we can be very successful just in that one skill, just by sitting down and really sort of working it out, if that makes sense. But there's another skill that's just as important, and this is a skill that I would say, some of my kids could work on as well, and that is being easily distracted. So, as parents, we're always told, find a nice, quiet place for a kid to do their homework and, have all the supplies ready and let them do their homework. I don't know about you, but that would be a very difficult thing to happen in my family. There's too many people and too many things going on. And actually, it really reflects life. How many of us are given the opportunity to work in a very quiet, serene environment every day? The fact is that, as part of the workforce, I need to be able to work in many different types of environments, including school. And so one of the things we'll do is work on not being easily distracted. And to sort of explain this, it's a skill called selective attention. And Brittany, what I'm going to have you do is, instead of read the word this time, I'm going to have you read the color of the word. So in other words, she has two inputs coming in. She has to ignore one and concentrate on the other. Okay? And you guys can try this with her. Are you guys ready? Get set. Go.
Red, black, blue, yellow, green, blue, yellow, black, green, red, blue, red, black, yellow, blue, red, black.
Okay. And so she did pretty good at that. If you notice, she did slow down a little bit. But you have these two inputs coming in. You have to ignore one and focus on the other. And if someone has selective attention issues, learning can be very difficult for them, especially in that group environment, or, you have 25 kids in a classroom, and they're all doing different things, but you're supposed to focus on the teacher, or you're in a cubicle setting at work and you have to ignore all the other conversations. Well, that is a learned and trained skill. And then the last skill that you'd want to develop is a skill called divided attention, which is very similar to a new term that they use a lot, which is called working memory. Not quite the same, but very similar. And this is a skill where it's almost like multitasking. It's going back and forth in between two inputs. And so to explain this, Brittany, I'm going to have you, and everyone can do this, I'm going to have you read color, word, color, word, color, word. So here you would read red, blue, yellow, green, blue. Okay, now Brittany has not practiced this, so are you ready, Brittany?
Yeah, I'll definitely be slower.
Okay. Ready, get set, go.
Red, blue, yellow, green, blue, yellow, green, black. I forgot where I was.
Good. Okay, and so that's actually a good example. So she has to go back and forth between these inputs. And actually, our students will do this, and you'll have like little 5-year-olds that will do this on beat, every other beat. And so, not that we're interested in them doing color words, but what is the skill that is developed from it? It's like this skill that allows them to do other tasks a lot faster and more efficiently. So that's just a little on attention. So let's look at another, we'll demonstrate another area. And this is another keyword that you've heard of, or you've probably heard of, called executive function. And executive function, also they'll talk about sort of the CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, which sort of organizes the brain, and it's sort of in charge of attending, processing speed, working memory, and then planning. So let me show you what a procedure would look like that has all of that in it. This is a skill that's a little bit more difficult if you were going to test it, but if you look at all these different areas on a test, you can make a pretty good decision on whether or not it's an issue. So these are number columns. Brittany's never done this either, so this will be good for her. And let's just start this with a different procedure to sort of build up to it. So Brittany, this is what I'm going to have you do. Now this is a procedure that we use in session, and it's called attention compute when we do it this way. And actually our students will be able to do 60 computations in a minute once they do this procedure, and we'll work on like sums, difference, and product. The idea isn't necessarily being able to do computations that quick, although it seems to help a whole lot in school, but it's the ability to analyze and come up with an answer within a second of time, and be able to do that with all different types of tasks. Okay, so Brittany, I'm going to have you add 3 to every number, and you're going to jump back and forth. So it would sound something like this: 7, 5, 5, 4, 8, 3, 9, 6, 10, 11. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to add 3 to every number as fast as you can. Ready, get set, go.
7, 5, 5, 4, 8, 3, 9, 6, 10, 11, 4, 11, no, 12, sorry, 11.
We might have found
7.
attention.
Sorry,
that's
12.
Good. That's 10. Good. Let me stop you. And so that, if you think about what that skill is, she's having to take several pieces of information, and I've also given her the job of doing it very quickly. So she has to deal with all of that all at the same time. Okay, so let's make it more of an executive function procedure. So this time I'm going to have you add 3 to the first number, and I'm going to have you multiply the second column by 3.
Oh, sure.
So you're going to add 3 to the first column, multiply the second one by 3. So she's having to go back and forth. So this is working memory, this is attention, this is processing speed, especially if I put a metronome, and this is also executive function because she's probably planning right now what she's going to do. Are you ready, Brittany?
Yes.
Ready, get set, go.
7, 6, 6, 3, 8, 0, 9, 9, 10, 24, 4, 24,
27.
11.
Okay.
Oh, 27.
Okay, so that would be like an executive function procedure, and this is again, it's there's a lot of focus on this skill, but this is a big skill. This is a big deal, and I would say that for one of my kids, this probably is the big thing going on in his life. In other words, his skills are very low in this area. So even if you had worked well with him and taught him how to analyze sounds and worked on his numbers, when it came to sort of organizing his thoughts, getting things done, retaining information, using it for future assignments, it was just blown. And we've made a lot of progress in this, but I would also say that there's a good amount to go as well. But this is a major, major skill. And so when you are considering maybe your own family members or people that you think could benefit from this type of training, what would happen if someone could just do that very quickly the first time, retain what they learned, do any task quickly, how would that have an effect on their life, their academics, how they would do socially? It has a huge impact, especially if they're deficient in it. So let's look at another skill. This is a skill called visual processing. And visual processing is not how well you see. So it's not what you get at an optometrist, but it's what you do with what you see. So for instance, we've just come out with a Comprehend RX program, and we would say when it comes to good comprehension, if it's reading comprehension, the first thing is probably reading fluency. The second thing is probably creating a good mental image. And for any of you that are, have an engineer or science background, usually people in the maths or, engineering, etc., artists usually are able to visualize really well. That's a very strong skill for them. But what if you didn't have that skill? What if it was hard for you to make a picture in your head? So, now, actually, I think this is not a PowerPoint, so I don't know. I can't cover this up. You're not supposed to look at this bottom, this bottom part here. I'm going to have to redo the procedure for a webinar here. But if you would cover up the bottom part of your screen or the answer, and you look at the top, I want you to try to think of how you would recreate the top. If you were to go behind it and then look through the screen, but hanging upside down. In other words, you're really manipulating it, right? So you go behind the screen and you're hanging maybe from a bar upside down, and now you have to write it out. What would that look like? And then you have the answer on the bottom. So I'll have to fix that for next webinar. But that's a really important skill. And again, if someone does have difficulty with charts and concepts, even the abstract, it's sort of a mixture of visual processing and logic and reasoning. These are very important skills for many subjects and many tasks that we have in our life. How about even getting around town? Luckily here in Colorado we have the mountains. So on a sunny day, you can look to the mountains and have a good idea of where you are. But why is it that someone always gets lost or someone has difficulty reading a map? It's probably because of this skill. Okay, so let's look at another skill, and that would be reasoning. And again, if I were going to just test one skill to find out IQ, a lot of times it would be a logic and reasoning skill or a reasoning test. So, and this is a very trained skill as well. In fact, it might be one of the skills you can train easier than others. But this is a logic and reasoning task here, and this is a test. So it's not a procedure, but an actual test. What would go in the middle box? Which number would go in the middle box? Anyone want to chat with us and answer? So, what number? Anyone have a guess? They're all quiet. Okay, so someone picked 4, but someone's still thinking. So you have to do it sort of fast. So let me take you through sort of the thinking, but give your answers if you can. So we would think from looking at it, if you look down column 1, they're all triangles. Column 3 is all rectangles. And this middle column, they're circles, right? So I would think it's going to be a circle, which would eliminate number 3. So now I'm just looking at 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Well, we know they all have lines in them, so it's more likely that the middle one would have lines that takes out number 6. And they all have more than one line. I would think that would take out number 1. So that takes me to 2, 4, and 5. And none of them have a triangle in them. I mean, they have part of a triangle. But if you look at it, the actual way that they all connect, only one of you are answering, by the way? No? Okay. The way that they all really connect is if you look at how many parts are in each shape here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the best answer would be 4. Oh, good job, Donna. Although yeah. So that's like a logic task. And what is logic important for? Well, how about making good decisions at recess? Making good decisions at home, problem solving, putting things together. And you think about any engineer, they're a problem solver, so that would be a really important skill for them. Okay, and then the last skill that we want to sort of demonstrate is a skill called auditory processing. And for our society, for our culture, for our language, auditory processing may be one of the most important skills for us, especially when someone's in school. And the reason being is that it is found that the number one underlying skill needed for good reading is this skill, auditory processing. So let's sort of look into this a little bit. Now with auditory processing, again, it's not what you hear, so it's not your hearing, but it's what you do with what you hear, how well you process it. So, and for auditory processing, it's the sounds that count, not the letters. So for instance, bike has 4 letters, but 3 sounds. B, I, K. And 8 has 5 letters, but only 2 sounds. A, T. So then if we look at a word like Fliebermulch, how would you say Fliebermulch without the ol sound? You would say Fiebermuch. What if you took the B sound and changed it to P? Now it would be Fiepermuch. What if you took the sound and switched it with the ch sound? It would be Fieperchum. I have to be a little careful when you're making up nonsense words. But it's that ability. It's the ability to analyze sounds in a syllable. And research has found, and actually the federal government spent over $200 million finding out why people fail to read. And in their study, 88% of those that had reading difficulties had a deficiency within this skill. And sometimes you'll hear phonemic awareness. That's different than phonetic awareness. So it's not hook it on phonics or hooked on phonics, but phonemic awareness. And in our own studies, this is taken from 2004, and we found that parents that checkmark reading difficulties, of the parents that checkmarked reading difficulties, 97% of those people that we tested were weak in auditory processing skills, or within auditory processing skills, phonemic awareness skills. Only 3% were proficient. So, and this is a big idea, okay? Because normally, as a parent, what you think of is if my child can't read, what do I need to get them? A reading program. They need a reading tutor. They need more help in reading. And even in schools, the focus would be if they can't read, this many words, which is required for 2nd grade, then we're going to give them some extra reading help. The problem is that if they have an auditory issue, until that auditory issue is developed and fixed, it's always going to affect their reading. Because if you have really good visual memory in 1st grade, you're going to do really well because you're just going to memorize how all the words look. But by the time you get to 3rd and 4th grade, you go from reading to learn to learning to read, and you have no concept or no real ability to attack new words. So comprehension becomes a really big issue. The good news is that phonemic awareness is a very changeable, trainable skill. And this is a skill that you'd want to develop ASAP for someone that started having difficulty with reading. And again, it's very hard to tell in like first grade, second grade, because they'll just memorize the word. But what happens if you give them a new word? And there's a test called a word attack test, which will take nonsense words. So these would be words that they've never seen before, and looks at how well they're able to decipher that code or decode. You can see here, though, that this is why we believe it's so trainable. This is taken from 2001. This study was based on 140 students, and the average pre-test score was a 6.2 year level. And then in 6 months, their average post-test score was a 14.2 year level. So 140 students, average age was 11.7. They averaged an 8-year gain in 6 months. That's incredible. And again, if you want to develop a good reader, you first develop these underlying skills. You think about with reading is this very complex task, right? So we always think, oh, it's just knowledge, but it's not knowledge. Reading includes attention, working memory, processing speed, logic and reasoning. Let's say you're reading from a science textbook. Auditory processing is the number one skill. It also requires good comprehension, requires real-life experience. So, for instance, if I'm reading about India and I've never been to India or I've never seen pictures of India, it's much more difficult for me to comprehend the story than if I've experienced India already. When my kids travel and they come back and they read about the African wildlife, they went on a safari. That changes the whole outlook. And so that's some long-term memory. Now, we can't give everyone real-life experience, so that's sort of that parent position. But all these other skills are skills that affect someone's ability to read. And this is why just giving someone who's having reading difficulty a reading tutor rarely, if ever, really works. It might just get them a little better, but if you never get to the core issue, it's not going to have the effective outcome that you want. And this looks at a bunch of different tasks that someone would do and some of the chief skills that would be required to do that task. So if you think about even listening to this webinar, some of you have probably attended really well, hopefully. Hopefully I'm not too boring, although my voice is a little weird right now. But and some of you have probably gone off and done something else. You might have a shorter attention span. How has that affected you in your life to have a shorter attention span or to have a working memory issue? And how is that going to affect your child if that's who you're considering for a program like this? Now, this is key, effective training methodology. And the reason I bring this up is because a few years ago, the main question that we would get is, well, how do you differ from tutoring? How do you differ from other educational tutoring out there? What is brain training? And we don't get that question as much as how would you differ from Luminosity, which has been on the market. So let me just sort of take you through the idea. And I think one of the better ways to understand the difference is to think about, let's say you had an overweight child, okay, and you wanted to get that child healthy. And you wanted to, nutritionally help them and actively help them. What would be your methods, right? It could be maybe some sports. Maybe you'd have to go to a nutritionist, or you could look up on the nutrition on the internet. What if you hired them a personal trainer that showed up for 120 hours? What would their body and their confidence look like after 120 hours of personal training? And the same truth that lies in, what would happen for someone physically, it's the same for how it would affect them mentally, okay? If you really want results, and that's where you're focused, then the only real course of action to help these skills is through one-on-one training. This is not something you can do in a group. You're not going to get the change you want over a computer. You want that one-on-one training where the trainer can focus on the student, where there's proper sequencing. I don't know about you, but if my kids play Xbox, let's say I give them a new game, they'll go in there, take a weekend to learn it. They wait till they're on level 56, and then they invite me to play, right? And so I come in and, die within a few seconds. I never want to play that game again. And if it's not sequenced properly for someone in training, in other words, if they don't feel like they're almost ready for the next level, then they're going to get frustrated and break off. So sequencing is very, very important. As well as one-on-one training offers feedback. So, in school, they might be given math, sort of a math idea once a week, right? And then the student is supposed to practice that idea all week, and then they get tested on it. What if they're making the same error every single day all week long? Now they get tested. It's only at the end of all their practice that they find out that they made an error. Immediate feedback gives that person the ability to correct the student right away, so they're not practicing errors. You have to have intense training. If you think about, you think about like the P90X of workouts or an insanity workout. Why do those work? Why is it that I can go to the gym, which I've done, and get on a treadmill for months and months and not lose any weight? It's because I'm watching TV on the treadmill. I'm just there's no intensity to it. You need someone pushing them so that they develop real skill. It needs to be very targeted, and this is probably one of the biggest things. If they have an auditory processing issue, working on logic and reasoning isn't going to affect it. So you have to find out where someone is weak and attack the weaknesses. So, when someone says, oh, but I'm a visual learner, well, then let's strengthen your auditory skills so that you could learn visually or auditorily or tactically, whatever it is. You don't just have one way that you learn. You can learn any way and in any environment. One of the unique part of our program is something called loading. And actually, if I haven't mentioned this before, my father is Dr. Ken Gibson. He's the founder of this program. And this is sort of what makes this program unique to all others. And that is this loading idea, that if you want to improve a skill, you start adding some additional tasks on top of it, and it will develop that skill so much faster. And this is a concept that we've integrated throughout our program, and I think that's why we get the results that we get. Our program is largely non-academic. So again, we understand that if someone has difficulty in math, it probably wasn't that teacher that year or even the curriculum, because out of a classroom of 25, maybe there were only 5 kids that didn't do well, or 7 kids that didn't do well. So why did the other kids do well? It's because they came to the table with different skills. So if we go back to this model, one of the first things that you want to do is have your person tested or get tested to find out if the symptoms that you see have a cause behind them. Is it motivation? Because every single time I used to sit down with my son, and here I'm a trainer for years and years and years, my husband would say, oh, he's just not motivated. Well, that might be true at this point. By 6th grade, yeah, you suffered enough where maybe you aren't motivated anymore. But it didn't start that way. I've never met a 1st grader that wasn't excited about school, or a kindergartner that wasn't excited about school. It's only after they try things several times and fail that motivation issue comes in. So, but this gives you testing will give you a clear idea of why, maybe you have all these concerns or questions and you want answers. And I'm going to show you what results look like in just a minute. But here's the top 3 reasons to get your child tested. At LearningRx, we do the Woodcock-Johnson cognitive testing, which if you professionally, if you went out to get that testing, could be anywhere from $1,600 to $3,000. And any of you that are online that have been through testing maybe with some of your kids, you're probably going, yeah, I know, I've already spent $5 or $6 grand trying to figure out what the problem is, and I still don't have a clear answer. What we'll do is, we're not there to give a diagnosis. The testing is not what drives us. It's the actual training. So, but what we can do is maybe connect your concerns and the symptoms you see with actual cognitive skills that could be causing it. And then you could invest your money into an outcome rather than answering a question. Also, the reason that we test is because one thing that separates us is we measure every student that goes through our program. And I want to show you those results. So when we pre-test, we post-test, 6 months to 8 months later. By the way, I know I've been talking a lot about kids, and you see a lot of slides on kids. About 70% of our student base is within the struggling students, so anywhere from 4.5 to 18. But given where we live here, we have been able to work with soldiers that have traumatic brain injury. We've worked with adults that have always had difficulty or had TBI. Around the country, we've worked with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. A lot of times seniors are a little bit more difficult to work with, and not because we can't get a great result, but just because they're more difficult. My dad actually had a brain injury 2 years ago from an infection that got into his brain, and I had to force him into the program after a few months. He wasn't getting any better, but I think he was okay with, so if you have a parent in your life or a family member or friend in your life whose memory has been very affected by something or just getting older, a lot of times they're okay with that injury, but I personally was not okay with him losing that skill, and there were drastic changes for him after the program. So I wouldn't say he's 100%, but he's probably 85, which for most of us is 100%. Very sharp guy. Okay, so this is just looking at reading. And again, if someone has a reading issue, first we attack the cognitive skill. And then once that cognitive skill is developed, then we attack reading. And this looks at, and what I want to show from this is it doesn't matter what the severity is. When someone tells you your child is dyslexic or, is just severely dyslexic or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can see that it doesn't matter where someone came in with our program, whether they were very, very low or just below average. They all got very good reading gains, and this is within a 6-month period or less. That's incredible if you look at any other reading score. In fact, the Chicago Public School Systems did a study on, I think, over 60,000 kids and 39 different reading tutor programs, which included some of the top reading programs that you would hear about. And after a year's worth of tutoring, the treatment groups averaged about a 2-week gain compared to the control group. Only 2-week gain in a year's worth of tutoring. That's pretty sad. And the reason is they took a content approach to it instead of a cognitive approach. So let's look at these cognitive skills. And this is looking at kids that fell between the 25th and the 50th percentile to start. This is probably on over 1,000 students. We have a full results report, by the way. If you want the results report, I can have Cheryl email you a copy of the results report, which goes into all the results. And results are great, but if it doesn't have some real life change, it doesn't mean a whole lot, and we understand that. But this is what happened. So a kid comes to us. If they started at the 25th to the 50th percentile, they averaged the 37th percentile in logic and reasoning. What that means is there were 36 students that they were above, but there were also 63 students that were ahead of them. Okay, so you have 100 kids standing in a row. There's 37 from the bottom. At the end of, and I think this study is on 90 hours of training, they were able to walk past 29 more students. Now they're at the 66th percentile in logic and reasoning. They walked past 29 more students. But they didn't just get this change. They got the change in short-term memory, the processing speed change, the auditory processing change, visual processing, and long-term memory change. So you go, and if you look, and now this is average on thousands of kids, and every, an individual test score is going to be different. But consider this child who used to be below average in every single skill, and in 90 hours of training, now they're above average in every single skill. What does that do for them? Not only academically, which is going to make, once they sit down to do the work, it's going to be a lot easier for them to do it, but how does that affect them socially? How does that mean to every single time? And now he's the quarterback. When he told us that this year, my husband and I looked at each other like, right. And then my husband went to his one of their exercises, and he came back and he said, wow, he really is the quarterback. So what does that do, for them? Here's a look at IQ change. And one of the things about IQ change is, again, IQ score doesn't have a lot of meaning as a whole score, but because everyone sort of likes IQ, we actually did a study for someone who was doing their dissertation on IQ change, and that's why we came up with this. So we averaged a 15-point to 20-point increase in IQ, and you can see that can take someone here from average to superior IQ in 90 hours of training. Just as far as medication, if some of you had questions about that, this gives you an idea of what happened. We surveyed parents at the end of training just on if they were off of medication or not from training, and 37% had discontinued medication within a 6-month period of doing training. 59% were undecided. So let me go ahead and open myself up to questions. Excuse me. If any of you have questions, you can just type them in, and I'll go ahead and take some time to answer this. Just a minute. For those of you that have been on the webinar, because you've been on the webinar, we're going to give you a discount to testing. Cheryl, what's their discount? We're going to give you a $75 discount off testing. So testing is normally $199. Okay, so that's a great deal. And that would include an hour assessment, and then on those major skills I covered, it would also include a consultation and a full report that you can take with you. So $124 for those of you on here. And what I'll do is I'll have Cheryl email you all with it. Okay. So as you're typing in all your questions here, I talked a little bit about my kids at the beginning. And what I'd say is, for one of my sons, he still needs to sit down and do the work. I think he's gotten so used to, getting away with not doing homework that I still have to get him to sit down. But once he sits down, he gets it. I mean, the kid can do math like you would not believe, and that was a huge struggle for him last year. So if I make sure to get him to sit there, it's changed him. He's not as impulsive. He doesn't get in as many fights at home. We don't have the hours of homework anymore at night. He can do, from 3 hours to 1 hour. My other son went from saying that reading was his enemy to being able to decode anything, and he's open to reading. So he really likes some books a lot, and he'll read those. But it's made things a lot easier for him. And then I have a daughter who's always done really, really well. But she did so well in some things that she was afraid to try other, new things. So she was sort of that perfectionist because I don't think she wanted to fail. And so she would go ahead and, whine and complain. And after training, she is open to trying anything now. And it's been an amazing change for her. Okay. So here's a question. So I'm at the world headquarters. Excuse me. Sorry, for some reason, if I have a webinar scheduled, I get this sickness. I'm at the world headquarters, which is on Centennial and Garden of the Gods. It's right off of that. But our center is actually located right off of I-25 in Woodman, right behind Carrabba's, or kitty corner from Carrabba's. And then we also have a training center down south, right next to Culver's on Lake Street. So we do have 2 training locations. Any other questions? We do have openings for testing for the rest of September. We do have some openings available, and for testing, we'd like the student to come in when they're at their best. So usually that could be like 10 or 11. So you probably pull them out of school, come get them tested. We also will send test results to their teacher, and if we can question their teacher and try to get a full idea of how that student is doing. Any other questions? Okay, and on brain injury. So we worked with about 60 soldiers that had brain injury. We get really great results with those that would have difficulty with working memory or focus issues from brain injury. And it's been a real pleasure to work with the military, especially since, I'm in the military. And we've also worked with a lot of other adults that are not in the military. And results have not changed based on someone's age. So if you're 30, you don't get less of a result because you're 30. In fact, you might get more of a result. And maybe it's the drive, the really wanting the change to happen. And so the sort of the number one skill that we would see development in, or we would hear about from parents, is just the change in someone's confidence. And so I think because all the all the kids have this personal coach, this personal trainer, and they can see themselves improving, one of the first things we do is we teach them the presidents of the United States, and they can do them forwards and backwards, which is not something a lot of people can do, so they get very excited about it. But they go out and they'll, tell classmates or everything. It can have a real big change and impact on them. But the number one thing would be that parents see a change in confidence. And I think it's just because once you've given them the skills so that they can feel confident trying any new task, whether it be in school or, sports or whatever it is, they think that they can do anything. So probably, most kids see changes anywhere from, you see some real life changes from 6 to 8 weeks, in the program. But by the end, that would be the number one comment from parents, is a change in confidence, and just having more time with their child. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I've recorded this webinar, so Cheryl can send you a link, and along with just a little email that says you get $75 off of testing. And, hopefully, if you've enjoyed the webinar, you'll share it with your friends. We'll try to do this maybe every 6 weeks or so for those of you that are interested. And I hope you have a wonderful day today. I'm so glad that it's sunny and beautiful outside. And it's been great to have the rain for some of us, not so good for others. But nothing better than a sunny day here in Colorado. So you all take care. Bye-bye.